Hello and welcome. Welcome to your inadequacies, your sense of torment, and nagging little doubts and pains in the back of your mind. Welcome to that. You're in it now. You're in the thick of it. This is the world you chose to inhabit. This is the life form that you currently are on this planet. The rising above sensation of sort of overcoming your own fears and doubts and anxieties about your worthlessness and state of listless self-indulgence on planet Earth. This is your condition. This is the place that you're stuck in. This is the mind that you will inhabit for the next however many years you choose to live on this planet. And I recommend going the full distance. I recommend going all the way to full old age. Get that seniority sensation in. This is yours. This is your life. This is sort of a thing that you just sort of happen to do. It's a piece of your identity. It's not the most glamorous thing, really, once you've explained it to enough people. You get to say, look at me, Ma, I'm an artist. Because that's sort of a social cue. It's not necessarily a sense of identity so much as it is a sense of serenity and being left alone by the world. You can't complain. I mean, there are worse conditions to be in. You might have the mind of an egotist, but that doesn't mean you have to have the outward-facing personality of an egotist. Someone who mistreats and belittles others, including themselves. You know. But that's sort of inherently where the torment comes from, and the expression of such torment comes in the form of isolation. Perhaps some people are more extroverted with their creative processes, but not I. And I would wager, since you're on the internet watching this as well, that you do not have that luxury of being a social creator. These are the outward-facing dynamics of the art world that get portrayed and get picked up on by young, impressionable people who are just trying to make it in the world, doing what they love and what they want to do. But you know what they say? If you love something, don't make a job out of it. If you love something, just have it as something that you keep in your back pocket, alright? Because people are fucking wolves. People are vicious. Man is a wolf for man, after all. Sure, you can look at these things in a positive outlook. You're not necessarily discriminated against for your social status. You're not necessarily discriminated against for the inner workings of your mind, but who knows how long that's going to last. So in the meantime, in the interim, in this world that we occupy, you can choose to occupy yourself. What do you call it? Entertainment. It's not so much a purpose in life. It's more of a thing that ends up becoming a purpose because everything else doesn't elicit that within your reward system, whatever psychology. I ain't no doctor, all right? Don't ask me about the inner machinations of your biochemistry and yada yada. Big words. It's just assume for that split second there that I used a bunch of big words that were really impressive and just internalize that, all right? Now going from that point onwards, you can say, well, I have my own process. I have my own world. I have my own little inner workings. And the approval of others and what other people see isn't necessarily the first option on the table when it comes to operating your brain. I'm sympathetic to this line of thought. But in the end, it comes down to a certain misery. Do you have that misery? Do you have a happiness associated with it? And how much happiness do you really need in order to create? Because it's an important factor in this. If you're a happy person, you're kind of less likely to be, how would I put it? Less likely to be on the profound side of things. Because profundity only comes from that sense of real loss, in a sense. There's happiness, and there's profundity and happiness in the sense of love, and identifying with the world through love, and seeing things through the lens of love. But in another sense, that's also a path of the self kind of mindset. You're not really looking at the world, you're looking at yourself and deciding for yourself to be happy. It's not intrinsically reflective of the world around you, it's reflective of your willpower. And willpower is important. You can conjure all sorts of things up. But it doesn't mean you have to believe your own bullshit necessarily. It just means you have to believe the results of your bullshit. Because in the end, that whole 80s thing, greed is good, results matter, all that shit, there's a lesson in there too. It's not all just gobbledygook. It's not all just nonsense meant to placate people into working longer hours. Work. And in the end, you didn't really want to work, did you? You didn't really want to work. You ended up here. For God's sakes. You're not putting in 12-hour days to get a promotion. You're not giving it your all to get the best import-export contract you possibly can. Calculate your margins and hire a tax guy and do all that nonsense. See, I know all those words. I have no idea how to do any of that. It means nothing whatsoever. It's sort of a sales game, interpersonally anyways. When it comes down to the art world and when it comes down to fine art, which is sort of the world that I emerged from, it has really nothing to do with, like, the world of talent or the world of actual skills or impressing people or anything. It is a sales game. In the end, you are selling. Your proof of concept is the fact that you make money. Your proof of concept is not the fact that you impressed people so much as you impressed one person into spending 10 grand on your work. Now that's important, right there. Because whose opinions actually matter in that world? Whose opinions actually matter for any sort of clout? Well, it's the wealthy in one sense or another. Either the wealthy in spirit. Oh, it's so wholesome to think of the wealthy in spirit as being influential in this world. But fundamentally they're not. Or you could look at it as terms of pure wealth. Pure wealth is good in a certain sense. I suppose if you want to look at it from an exploitative angle, yeah, sure. And pure wealth is sort of sinful. Sorry, I have to use the space heater to dry this. I don't have a little hair dryer. Wish I did. Now, in another sense, being trapped here doesn't really define you so much as it just contains you. It contains your thoughts. It gives you a wrapper. It gives you a formula. It gives you a baseline by which to extrapolate. Extrapolate what? A lot of people use their positivity to create. A lot of people use their ability to love to create. And sure, that's tried and true. I'm not going to say it's old hat, but I'm just going to say it's something that people are sort of... they've collectively immunized themselves against it. Sure, the process is there, but how many waves of people going through hormonal problems can really identify with your work? After a while, it comes down to that sort of sullen, adult, mature sense of depression that really fuels art appreciation. The truest one, I guess, in a sense, because it is a reaching out, it is a communication, a soul-to-soul type thing. You relate to someone across time, the man above time type phenomenon, where because someone felt what you felt, no matter how negative or just intrinsically depressing it may be, it makes you feel better that someone else has shared in your misery. Misery does love company, and the surrogacy for the company of misery is a certain art form. It can be depressing music, which I am partial to. Although, exposure to depressing things in moderation, as you know, everything in moderation. The same thing applies to positivity. You can get a burnout. You can get a burnout from not even realizing that you're not happy. And then all of a sudden it hits you. Wait, I'm not really happy. But who cares? In the end, it's the message. In the end, it's the outward-facing persona of the happy person, the outward-facing persona of the creative person, the intelligent person. The inner machinations, who cares? Who cares? I'm not a shrink. Are you a shrink? How many shrinks can you talk to about the inner machinations of things? How many teenagers going through an intellectual phase can you actually impress? By trying to relate the profundities of life. Why do I keep using that fucking word? It's so stupid. Profundity. Now, process right here. This has nothing to do with any real raw talent or, interpretive language. You could imagine yourself listening to I don't know, some sort of ambient album, some sort of doom jazz electro mood thing, you know, lo-fi hip-hop mix, 10 hours, whatever, to get your brain juices flowing, to get you in a certain mindset. You look at the drawing afterwards, or you look at the painting, you look at the photography, you look at the photo montage, the collage, the digital artwork that you've done. It doesn't necessarily reflect it. It just reflects whatever mindset you were in. It doesn't. You see a painting, it doesn't remind you of the music. You can listen to music while you do it, and it might enhance the experience. It might, but the bulk of the emotions that go into artwork, they're ephemeral. It's an attempt to create something that is sort of eternal out of the ephemeral. Now, what am I seeing? Now, this is more of a Rorschach test type thing. What do I see? What do I see in this? Because it's not, it has an aesthetic behind it, I suppose. You could, I just cut this here and reframe it like this there and whatever. But I'm more of a cartoonist at heart. I don't necessarily have the chops, as it were, to be one of those photoreal guys who makes all the fancy-ass drawings that make someone go, wow, you draw really good. I'm into aesthetics. I'm an esthetician. A beautician of the page. What are those things when people have made up those dumbass labels for their jobs? Oh, I'm not a barber. I'm a capillary architect. Oh, I'm not a janitor. I'm a surface technician. Well, a lot of art is that. It's the terms that people choose to identify with. The symbols. The symbols operate up here as well. And symbols can be words, and language is symbols. And you can make up your own to an extent. You can be the author of your own pantheon. And it's being able to conjure a pantheon that other people can relate to, and other people can look at and say, wow, me too. He's just like me. That's sort of an important aspect of it. It's not necessarily that you are some sort of genius, although I would wager that there are geniuses out there who have no idea that they are. It's not even that. It's actually unhealthy even for someone who is smart to think that they're smart, because that kind of gets into their head in more ways than one. You ever met those kids whom everyone told them when they were kids that they were smart, but it was sort of a social politeness thing because they were more awkward than intelligent, and that awkwardness reminded them of smart people in movies because that's how it's chose to be put forward. That's also a symbol. That's also part of the creative process. It was in the expression of the guy who created that to willfully associate those two character traits. Oh, intelligence? That just means you're socially retarded. Oh, intelligence? Well, that might mean you're like a super badass guy. Super badass comic book character guy who is smart and cool and funny and who beats up the bad guys. But it means nothing. It's associative. You put it in your head, and it's in your head for a reason. You're conditioned as an audience. You're conditioned as a consumer. Things reflect themselves in media. Things reflect themselves in popular artwork. Not for any particularly good reason, just because you've already seen it before. And the familiarity of it. But familiarity does breed contempt, and people do move on. You do have to change the style every now and then. You have to adapt. You have to go from the 90s to the 2000s, from the 2000s to the 2010s. And the pop culture that ensues has to reflect that. Now, what do I see? What do I see? Is there anything there at all? Could it just be sort of a choral thing? Could it just be sort of an organic thing? Could it be a skull breaking apart? Do I really want to draw a guy with an exploding head? No, I don't. Do I really want to do a cartoony thing of some skull demon thing that I've seen before and drawn a million times before? No, I don't. But it's what I see immediately. And that's the associative part. It's also about habit. If you're habituated, you're controlled. I wouldn't say maliciously controlled, but at least cynically controlled. You can be cynically controlled and steered into consumption one way or another. And consumption also involves agreement. Do you agree with this sentiment? Do you agree with this mindset? Do you agree with my outlandish, ridiculous, fringe opinion because I'm a cool person? There's a sort of hierarchy behind coolness and coolness and status. things of that nature, and whatnot, etc., etc. Where do you see yourself in the world? Do you see yourself as some sort of grandiose visionary? Do you really think that your mind sees things that other people's minds don't? Well, if it did, and you translated them outwards, no one would know what the fuck you're talking about. And no one would care. This is also the reason why, in the sales game of art, you'll often take something perplexing, the art of some creator who lived a depressing, just awful life, deprived, the deprivation aspect of it, and you see that deprived state, and you associate it with your minorly deprived state of, ooh, I can't find this thing that I really want, therefore feel bad. But because you feel bad doesn't mean that you inherently relate to someone else who's felt bad. I mean, for God's sakes, they killed themselves. You're not about to kill yourself because you couldn't buy a new laptop, are you? You're not about to kill yourself because you can't afford new clothes. Just go to Goodwill, dumbass. Take the clothes out of the mouths of the poor, like the rest of us. Something cartographical? Something organic? Something colorful? Something design related? Who knows? What if I just interject a line right here? Just something that cuts it up. 1, 2, like that. And then you refine the line. No real artistry here. It's sort of a flick of the wrist, a trick of the hand. Whether you see it or not, that's sort of, it's up to you. It's not up to me. See, even I can play the fine art game. I was classically trained after all. Not for the best, but here I am. Imparting to you what little wisdom I actually have, what gift of the gab that I may have picked up over the years. It's sort of important for you to pick up on that mindset. I guess not really important, but I can't control myself, so here you are, and here I am. What do you see? What do you think? Like, what does the complexity remind you of? Why is there sort of a shape that came out of a chaotic shape? What does that make you think of? Could it be a drawing? Could it even be anything? Could it be one of those pieces of abstract art that people don't really know how to explain beyond using buzzwords? The gestalt of things, etc. I have no such patience. I can't sit around and listen to other people talking about their creations. Lord knows, I'm glad other people do. I'm glad other people do care about what other people have to say about their creations, but I don't. It's only interesting insofar as their bullshit game, their improvisational game when it comes to the sales floor, when it comes to the kill room of the gallery, because that's really where the business happens. You're trying to convince someone 5 years later to pay the same price and more for something that's sold to someone who was essentially bullshitted into the sale. Get someone drunk, you buy a big wheel of Parmesan, the $1,000 ones that weigh like 250 pounds, and you put that in the middle of the gallery, you chunk it up with knives and stuff at the party, everyone's all liquored up, everyone's all happy. They got money to spend. They're the reason for your existence. Well, existence. Your known existence. It's an outward-facing phenomenon. It's not something that they can just divine, or they can just interpret what goes on internally based on what you say or based on what you portray. Because chances are it's too embarrassing to convey. Chances are the biggest motivation for anything that you do creative-wise comes from a fair amount of shame and inability to express the things that you truly mean. Because you might think they're cringy. You might think that they're just, I'm too forward-thinking for this world, so everything I do is just years in the future, and no one can get this. A fallacy. Everything's set up to fallacies. Your own creative process is sort of a fallacy. You grew up with TV. Don't say you didn't. I know you did. You grew up with a bunch of Disney movies and shit. You grew up with a bunch of art house things, or things that were shown to you as being art house. You grew up with things that took a budget to get in front of your eyes. There's a motivation there. It's always going to affect you, whether you realize it or not. You're not immune. You can be the most intellectual person in the world, but where did you hear about all the intellectual figures that you now have dived into? You heard about it because of cursory glances into the world of big brain people, from the dumbass lowest common denominator Hollywood garbage that's out there. And no one can fault you for that because that's what's available. How do you even create a culture and a creative endeavor that would reach beyond the popularity aspect of things? You can't. Because they'll beat you to the punch. They got billions of dollars. What have you got? You got a pen and paper, and you got a bunch of online friends, and you got a bunch of people who will tell you that what you do is good even though it probably sucks, and you know it probably sucks, and you kind of resent them for saying that it's good even though you know it sucks. And you kind of wish that there'd be someone who would be a bit more of a hard ass on you and say, hey, yeah, see this good thing that someone did, this really good piece of art? You're never going to do that. You're never going to do that. That gives you more of the fire. Because why? Because it strokes that negativity in you that you have to fight. And it's in that fight that you will find yourself in a lot of ways. It's always through a sort of conflict, a sort of rise of willpower on your part that you can determine anything. See, look, this doesn't look like anything. But there's a strangeness to it wherein, and this is just in my own drawings, for example, I take some sort of complex shape that I've made randomly, and if you assign a face to it, say like if I just started a face right here, if I just start like the shadow in the eyes, it's not inherently complicated. Brow line. See, it's cartoony. Like, see, imagine there's a face that starts to come out of there. Like, see, look, now it's the top of someone's head. It brings up something else, and then someone can say, oh yeah, he meant explodey brain, he meant this, he meant that. Purely associative. Where's the actual process? I don't even know. I don't think you're supposed to know. That's also part of the game. The game is getting you to second guess your own motivations. Do you really have to? Do you really have to second guess your own motivations every single time you make something? And what is the underlying real purpose? Is it for others? I would argue that yes, it is. I think that the artist in a vacuum is just a rearranger. You're just rearranging shapes. You're just rearranging matter on paper. You're just rearranging prints and stock and whatever it is that you create with. Oh look, use something a bit more advanced. I put the blue and the yellow, but you don't mix them, so it's like, and now it creates a different phenomenon. I don't even know anymore. No one even knows anymore. There's a luck behind it, which also seems like sort of a bitter argument to make, that there's luck associated with art, but it's... When you deal with randomness, when you deal with matter on paper, when you deal with things that just aren't immediately available, like your ability to create something out of thin air, the randomness is good. The randomness is kind of all you've got. And since it is interpretative, since it is sort of a Rorschach type phenomenon, that's all you've really got to work with anyways. It's up to others to think that there's any depth to anything, weirdly enough. It's not really up to you. You create, you do something, whatever the hell it is, because it could literally be anything. I don't pretend to be a videographer. I don't pretend to be a sound producer. I don't pretend to be anything like that. I don't even pretend to be an artist anymore. Artist is a social thing. You can say that to yourself personally, but if you lived on a desert island, are you even an artist anymore? No, it requires an audience. An attention span. So who's paying attention? I think that's your real question moving forward. For yourself. For however far along the line of depression and cynicism you are as to your own creation. Who's paying attention is it's equally as important as what do I think, because what you think will also change, and there's no apology necessary for that. It's not even hypocrisy. It's just the nature of things. You are human after all.